Today, we are going to be talking about Marvel's Boy Scout, Steve Rogers, aka Captain America. But the common collective man with a plan isn't so perfect as one would assume. So let's break it down on this episode of Marvel Monday. Behind that shield, the calm, collected man with a plan isn't as perfect as he seems. His story is full of quiet pain, unbreakable loyalty, and a deep internal struggle that makes him one of the most deep heroes in the MCU and the comics. You know how this works by now on our psychological breakdowns. We unpack what makes these complex heroes, anti-heroes, and villains tick. So we will be exploring their story arc and the key moments that shaped them, their personality type and why it fits so perfectly, and the traumas, wounds, and experiences that drive their behavior. So grab your shield and let's get into it. Stephen Grant Rogers was born in Manhattan, New York on September 28, 1922, or in the MCU, Brooklyn on July 4th of 1918. They totally made him born on Independence Day. It's cute, right? His parents were poor Irish immigrants, Joseph and Sarah Rogers. Joseph died when Steve was young. In the comics, it's often tied to the hardships of the Depression and alcohol. In the MCU, it was mustard gas. Sarah, a nurse, soon followed from tuberculosis, leaving Steve orphaned and alone as a teenager. He grew up small, sickly, and frequently bullied, prone to everything from pneumonia to getting knocked around in the back alleys. In the MCU, his best friend Bucky Barnes was there to pull him out of fights, like that powerful first scene in the first Avenger. In the comics, though, young Steve Rogers often stood up to bullies completely on his own. Either way, those early years forged his fierce unforgiveness of anyone who preyed on the weak. Determined to do his part, Steve tried repeatedly to enlist in the US Army during World War II, and was rejected every single time. He was classified as 4F, which is basically saying that he was too frail to survive basic training, let alone combat. But one man saw something special in him, Dr. Abraham Erskine. This brilliant scientist chose Steve for Project Rebirth, or the Super Soldier Program, not because of his body, but because of his heart. Good becomes great. Bad becomes worse. Steve fit the description of a good man. Steve's unshakable sense of right and wrong convinced Erskine that power wouldn't corrupt him. After the serum and the Vita rays, the scrawny orphan transformed into the peak human Captain America. Despite in the MCU spending a hilarious few moments as the dancing monkey of the USO shows before proving himself a soldier. Steve went on to lead, or fight alongside, the Howling Commandos, an elite squad striking Hydra and the Nazis. In the comics, it's Nick Fury's legendary Howlers. In the MCU, Steve personally forms and leads the team with Bucky Barnes, Dum Dum Dugan, and the rest of them. They become his found family, until tragedy strikes. In the final days of the war, Steve crashed the Red Skull's bomber, known as the Valkyrie, into the Arctic ice to save millions. The Super Soldier Serum put him in suspended animation. He stayed frozen for nearly 70 years. When S.H.I.E.L.D. thawed him out, Steve woke up in a world that had moved on without him. His friends aged or gone, his values tested, and his identity forever split between the man he was and the symbol that he had become. No matter the version, Steve Rogers is defined by these things. He is loyal, he is kind, protective, and a leader through and through. He proves time and time again that he is exactly the good man that Dr. Erskine believed he would be. So, what psychological profile does that create? Many fans and analysts debate between ESFJ and ISFJ, but the strong consensus stands on the ISFJ, the defender, which is introverted, sensing, feeling, and judging. Some argue that ESFJ is because Steve takes responsibility seriously and has a clear sense of right and wrong. With introverted and extroverted being the main distinction between the two, we're going to stick with ISFJ. And let's be honest, the man isn't known to be the life of the party, like Tony Stark. More like the kind-hearted bouncer at the door, making sure that you're drinking water while drinking yourself into a stupor. Kind of like, I know you're enjoying yourself, but make sure you're staying hydrated, kid. I feel that extrovert isn't Steve Rogers, so I'm going to be focusing on the consensus that he is an ISFJ. So let's break down why ISFJ fits him so perfectly using the classic cognitive functions. Introverted sensing. Steve relies heavily on his personal experiences and past lessons. He draws strength from his Brooklyn roots, wartime memories, and traditional values. After thawing, he struggles with rapid change, still using a physical book instead of a Stark Tech, and remembering every detail of his old apartment or army regulations. This gives him incredible stability, but also fuels his quiet sense of detachment. Extroverted feeling. Steve is deeply empathetic and driven to protect others. He'll sacrifice himself without hesitation, throwing his body on the grenade as a tiny pre-serum kid, risking everything to rescue the 107th, or nearly ripping his arm off while he was trying to stop Bucky from going away in the helicopter while he was under his programming. He leads with his heart, creating harmony and loyalty in his teams, whether it's the Howling Commandos or the Avengers. Introverted thinking. In Crisis, Steve shows sharp internal logic. He is the man with a plan, quickly analyzing situations and improvising smart solutions. Extroverted intuition. Steve can't be skeptical of wild new ideas or rapid societal shifts at first. His man out of time angst partly comes from the discomfort with uncertainty, though he grows and adapts when it matters most. This ISFJ typing captures Steve's core, a dependable guardian shaped by loss who finds purpose in his service and tradition, yet quietly wrestles with who he is beneath the shield. Now let's zoom out and take a look at the ISFJ personality type in general, which is often called the Defender, and why it mirrors Captain America so powerfully. He's supportive and empathetic. ISFJs genuinely enjoy helping others and create win-win situations. Steve lives this, always putting people first, whether it's the soldiers in World War II or civilians in the modern world. He's reliable and hardworking. They are meticulous, steady, and go above and beyond. Steve is the ultimate I can do this all day guy who follows through no matter the cost. He's observant and practical, exceptional memory for details and people. Think of Steve noticing every little thing out of place or recalling old tactics in battle. He's loyal and dutiful, deep commitment to relationships and doing what's right. This is Steve's moral compass in action. But with positives, there's always negatives. He's resistant to change. ISFJs can struggle with sudden shifts or unfamiliar territory. Steve's post-thaw depression and feeling like a relic perfectly illustrates this man out of time existential angst. Overly self-sacrificing. They may neglect their own needs or burn out trying to please and help everyone. Steve repeatedly risks or gives up his own happiness for the greater good. Avoidance of conflict or criticism. While Steve stands firm on principles, he can internalize guilt and withdraw emotionally rather than confront those personal pains head on. Perfectionism and inflexibility. High standards for themselves and others can lead to quiet judgment when people stray from the right path. ISFJs approach romance and friendship with enormous dedication and loyalty. They seek deep, enduring connections rather than the casual flings. They are incredibly giving, supportive partners who remember the little things and show love through consistent actions. For Steve Rogers, this shows up beautifully and painfully. His unbreakable bond with Bucky reflects that long-term protective devotion, yet his identity struggles often to make relationships incredibly complicated. In The Avengers in 1966, number 25, Steve wonders to himself, yes, as Captain America, I wear the mantle of Avengers leadership. But what of the man inside the costume? What of Steve Rogers? Am I destined to go through life with no real identity of my own? Is Steve Rogers always to live in the shadow of Captain America? This internal conflict spills directly into his romances. In The Tales of Suspense of 1967, number 95, frustrated by romantic trouble with S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Sharon Carter due to their mutual devotion to duty, Steve tries to retire as Captain America, declaring, "The time has come for Captain America to finally die, so that Steve Rogers can begin to live." But retirement proves impossible. Nick Fury bluntly tells him, "You can't give up being Captain America, because you are Captain America. It would be easier to turn your back on Steve Rogers." Thanks, Nick Fury. Even later in Captain America number 107, Steve looks around and asks himself, perhaps it would have been better if I had never been rescued from the floating glacier, where I was suspended in animation for 2 decades. The world seems so changed, so different. I feel like a relic, a holdover from some dim and dismal past. These moments show the classic ISFJ tension, A deep desire for meaningful personal relationships clashes with overwhelming duty and a fear that the real Steve Rogers will always live in the shadow of the symbol. Steve longs for normalcy, that dance with Peggy that he never got. But his senses of responsibility keeps pulling him back into the role that isolates him emotionally. It's loyal love mixed with quiet grief and self-sacrifice. ISFJs thrive in collaborative, service-oriented roles where they can use attention to detail, reliability, and empathy to help others. Classic fits include teaching, nursing, medicine, therapy, human resources, customer service, organization roles, law enforcement or military, any job involving structure, traditions, and making a tangible difference in people's lives. They prefer stable, team-focused environments over high-pressure competition. Steve's career as a soldier and an Avenger is the ultimate ISFJ expression: structured duty, protecting others, and upholding values in a practical, hands-on way. These ISFJ traits aren't just theoretical, they're forged in the fires of deep trauma. Steve's childhood was marked by chronic hardships, growing up sickly, impoverished, and relentlessly bullied in the Depression-era Brooklyn, combined with the acute loss of his mother and father, leaving him orphaned and isolated. World War II layered on even more pain: the horrors of war, the presumed death of his best friend Bucky Barnes, and his own sacrificial crash of the Valkyrie into the Arctic ice, intensifying his self-sacrificial loyalty and willingness to endure isolation for the entire good. Then came the ultimate displacement: awakening after 70 years frozen, and a profound cultural shock that left him grieving lost loved ones like Peggy and struggling to integrate into a new society and replaying old routines for stability. This man-out-of-time trauma stresses his inferior extroverted intuition, fueling skepticism towards rapid change and secrecy, yet his FE pushes him to rebuild the connections and defend harmony until core principles are threatened. As an ISFJ, Steve channels this accumulated pain into quiet resilience rather than bitterness, turning personal wound into the steadfast strength of a protector who fights not for glory, but to restore order and shield others. At his core, Steve Rogers is the ultimate defender. His early traumas, orphanhood, bullying, physical frailty, wired him to stand up for the vulnerable. Project Rebirth and the ice didn't change his heart, they amplified it. As an ISFJ, Steve channels personal pain in the quiet strength and service. His existential struggles, like identity split, survivor's guilt, and feeling out of time, are classic for the type when their stable world is shattered. Yet his resilience, loyalty, and moral clarity make him the hero that we all look up to. He shows that true strength isn't just super soldier power, it's protecting what matters, even when the world changes around you. That's what makes Steve Rogers timeless. He's not flawless, he's just human. And that's why we love him. So what do you think? Is Steve a perfect ISFJ, or do you see him leaning towards the ESFJ type? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let me know which Marvel character that we should break down next. Until next time, keep the shield held high, and I'll see you next week.